It was late Sunday evening in Austin, and the apartment felt wrapped in an unusual stillness. I remember sitting by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the heavy Texas dusk. There was a gentle hum of the fridge in the kitchen, the steady ticking of the clock down the hallway, and the faint, distant sound of someone's music drifting up from the street below. It was the sort of quiet that amplifies your thoughts, the kind that makes even small sounds seem enormous. Then I heard the front door click open. That sound, a little too gentle, as if whoever was coming in didn't want to wake the house. But there was no one else to wake. It was just me and my thoughts, just as it had been all weekend. The next thing I saw was the familiar shape of Jason, my boyfriend of nearly 7 years, wheeling his suitcase behind him. He looked tired, in that way people look after a long flight, shirt wrinkled, hair a mess, the shadow of stubble darkening his jaw. He flashed me that lopsided smile I used to fall for every time, the one that was meant to disarm and reassure all at once. "Hey, Aver," he said softly, dropping his bag near the door and stepping into the living room. "Hey yourself," I replied, getting up to meet him. The air between us felt charged and strange, like we were both actors returning to a play we'd forgotten the lines to. He leaned down and kissed my cheek, a quick, familiar gesture. I caught the faintest whiff of cologne, but also something else, maybe fatigue, maybe just travel, I told myself. He started talking immediately, recounting how the meetings in Los Angeles had dragged on forever, how the hotel coffee tasted like burnt rubber, how he was so tired he could barely remember what city he was in. He always had stories from these trips, little moments that made me laugh, the Uber driver who lectured him about barbecue, the weird art in his hotel lobby, a coworker's accidental wardrobe malfunction at a conference. I listened, or tried to, but my mind kept catching on small details, the way his eyes flickered away from mine, the way he seemed both present and a million miles away. Still, I laughed in the right places, happy to have him home, ready for a sense of normalcy to return. I told myself I was being silly, that all couples go through these stretches of distance, especially when work keeps you apart for days at a time. We moved into the bedroom together, as we always did when he returned from a trip. It had become our ritual. He'd toss his suitcase on the bed, I'd help him unpack, and would chat about anything and everything: Austin traffic, the neighbor's noisy dog, which of our friends got engaged. There was comfort in the familiar choreography. Jason unzipped his suitcase, and I started pulling out his things, just like always. Crisp button-downs, folded surprisingly neat. I taught him how to pack, I reminded myself with a smile. A travel-sized cologne bottle, a paperback novel with a Starbucks receipt marking his place, and a small bag of toiletries. "Did you eat anything besides takeout this time?" I teased, holding up an untouched granola bar. He grinned. "Hey, I had an apple on the flight. That counts as nutrition, right?" I rolled my eyes and kept unpacking. Then, my hand brushed against something strange. Something soft, satiny, out of place among the standard shirts and socks. I hesitated, curiosity getting the better of me. I reached back in, fingers closing around delicate lace. I pulled it out slowly, already knowing this wasn't mine, but hoping, stupidly, that maybe I'd forgotten something, maybe I'd bought it months ago. But no. It was a lacy red bra, small and intricate, almost dainty. Not my style. Not my size. I stared at it for a moment, my heart dropping straight through the floor. My mind went blank, then wild, racing through possibilities. A hotel mistake? A leftover from laundry? A prank? The explanations crowded in, desperate for attention, but none of them fit. Not really. I turned to Jason, the bra dangling from my hand like some bizarre trophy. He looked up from his phone, and for a split second, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Panic? Annoyance? It was gone so fast I almost thought I'd imagined it. Jason, what is this? I asked, keeping my tone as even as I could, though my insides felt like they were being squeezed tight. He blinked, then laughed. A little too quickly. A little too brightly. Oh, where? That must be a laundry mix-up from the hotel. You know how those places are, right? They must have tossed someone else's stuff in my bag at the cleaners. Crazy, huh? He shrugged, like it was nothing, like this sort of thing happened every day in the world of business travel. I tried to match his smile, but my hands trembled. I slipped the bra back into the suitcase and tried to let the moment go, to let it dissolve the way he wanted it to. But my thoughts had already started spinning, the room suddenly too small, too quiet, every sound amplified, the tick of the clock, the hum of the fridge, the sound of my own heartbeat thumping in my ears. I tried to shake it off, to chalk it up to coincidence or bad luck. But deep down, I knew things like this didn't just happen. Not to us. Not out of nowhere. And as Jason turned away, talking about flight delays and lost luggage, I found myself replaying the moment again and again, searching his face for cracks I might have missed. Jason kept talking, filling the room with the kind of easygoing chatter he used to use when he wanted to distract me. Stories about boardrooms and conference calls, jokes about the hotel gym, tales of the barista who put oat milk in his coffee by mistake. But all I could hear was the thumping in my chest and the question I hadn't really asked. A hotel laundry mix-up? Maybe if it were a sock. Maybe a plain white shirt. But not this. This wasn't something anyone could mistake for mine. Not in size, not in color, not in style. And it definitely wasn't the kind of mistake that slipped through hotel security. Still, I nodded and laughed at his jokes, acting like I'd already forgotten the whole thing. I wanted to believe him. I really did. Because if I didn't, I'd have to admit that something was wrong, something bigger than a misplaced piece of clothing. So I went along with it, letting him put his suitcase away, letting him lean over and kiss my forehead, letting him slip into the bathroom for a shower like nothing had happened. But as soon as I heard the water running, I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the closed door. The bra was no longer a random object. It had become a message, whether it was meant for me or not. I wondered, was it carelessly hidden because he assumed I'd never look? Or did some part of him want me to find it? Either way, it felt careless. Either way, it spoke louder than any of his easy explanations. I started unpacking the rest of his bag, more for the comfort of doing something than out of necessity. Each shirt felt heavier than it should, as if every thread was suddenly a piece of evidence. The little travel things he always brought home, a mini bottle of bourbon, a crumpled flyer for a taco place in Venice Beach, all seemed loaded now, suspicious in their ordinariness. For a moment, I thought about our years together, the weekends at Zilka Park, the late-night tacos after concerts, the ordinary routines we'd built like bricks, strong enough to stand on. Or so I'd thought. And now, one scrap of lace had cracked the foundation. But I didn't feel angry. Not yet. What I felt was sharper, colder, the beginning of clarity, a kind of detached focus I hadn't known I was capable of. When Jason came out, hair wet, smelling of hotel soap, he smiled and sat on the bed beside me. I smiled back, tucking all that storm behind my ribs. This wasn't the time for a confrontation. Not tonight. Not when everything still felt like it might tip over into something I couldn't control. Instead, I waited, listening to him talk about work drama and awkward dinners, the same stories as always, but now colored with suspicion. Every word felt double-edged. I kept glancing at him, trying to see the man I knew, trying to fit him back into the shape I trusted. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on my side, watching the outline of his back in the dim light, listening to his breathing settle. My mind was running wild. Who was she? Where did they meet? Was it a fling or something deeper? How long had he been lying to me? I had no answers, only the question pulsing in my head. What do I do now? By morning, the unease had settled in my chest like a stone. Jason was up early, moving around the kitchen, humming to himself while he brewed coffee. He looked relaxed, perfectly normal. Maybe that's what hurt the most, how easy it was for him to slip back into routine. I sat at the table, scrolling through my phone, pretending to check emails. Every time he spoke, I listened for cracks, for static behind the music. He came over, kissed my forehead, and headed out for work, whistling as he left. I watched the door close behind him and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. That night, when Jason went to shower again, I found myself drawn to his jacket, draped over the chair in the living room. My hands felt steady, but inside my heart pounded as if it wanted to leap from my chest. I checked the pockets, and there it was, a neatly folded receipt from the hotel bar in LA. 2 cocktails. A bottle of Prosecco. Dessert for 2. No mention of a business dinner, no group from the office. Just a private little celebration for 2. I stared at the receipt so long my eyes blurred. It didn't explain itself. It didn't need to. I placed it on my dresser, my fingers brushing over the sleeve of his dress shirt, and there it was again, that unfamiliar sweet, floral scent, stronger now than the night before. Not my perfume, not any I'd ever worn. The realization hit me, not as a shock, but as confirmation. Whatever Jason was hiding, he was getting sloppy. He must have assumed I wouldn't notice, or maybe he just didn't care anymore. I folded the receipt carefully, almost tenderly, and tucked it in the same drawer as the bra. Seeing them together felt powerful, like I was assembling the missing pieces of a puzzle only I could see. I could have stormed into the bathroom, demanded answers right then and there, but what would that have given me? Another lie, maybe 2, wrapped in that same careless charm. No. If I was going to confront Jason, I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof, undeniable, impossible to spin truth. When he finally came out, steam curling from his hair, he launched straight into some story about a broken printer at work, grinning like nothing in the world was wrong. I smiled, played along, every muscle in my face holding its position like porcelain. But inside, something in me had already shifted. The balance of power had tilted, and Jason didn't even realize it. He still thought I was in the same place I'd been yesterday, trusting, unguarded, completely his. He couldn't have been more wrong. That night, as Jason's breathing slowed beside me and the city outside faded into silence, I stared at the ceiling. All those years we'd spent building our lives together, suddenly, they felt as fragile as glass. I tried to remember the last time I'd felt truly secure with him, the last time I hadn't second-guessed a laugh, a look, a text he sent late at night. I was mapping out my next steps, every plan calculated, methodical, patient. Gone was the woman who would have confronted him in a burst of emotion. Instead, I became someone else, someone who watched, who waited, who collected evidence piece by piece. If he was going to lie to me, he was going to have to work a lot harder than this. I woke early, just before sunrise, and turned over to look at Jason's face. In sleep, he seemed so peaceful, almost innocent. There were moments I caught myself hoping it was all a mistake, a cruel twist of fate, a coincidence, anything but the obvious. But that hope was shrinking, replaced by a cold, focused clarity. Jason rolled over, mumbled something about a project deadline, and padded off to the shower. As soon as the water started, I got up and opened my dresser drawer, touching the bra, the receipt. They felt less like accusations now, more like clues, evidence that I was right to trust my instincts after all. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready. By the time Jason came out, towel around his waist, I was smiling at him, handing him coffee, playing my part perfectly. It was easier than I'd thought it would be. In fact, the longer I stayed silent, the more I realized how much power I had. The less I said, the more space I had to observe, the small cracks in his stories, the pauses that went just a beat too long. Something told me he would slip again, and this time, I'd be ready. It happened sooner than I expected. A few days later, Tuesday morning, the kind of ordinary day that should have been boring. Jason was in the shower, steam already fogging up the bathroom mirror. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, and I reached for it, heart pounding. I told myself I was just checking the time, just curious. But my hands moved quickly, unlocking it with the passcode I'd known for years. There, near the top of his messages, was a name I didn't recognize, Eric. A man's name, but the messages beneath it were anything but masculine. The words were flirty, private, marked with inside jokes and teases that made my stomach knot. I scrolled, unable to stop. It was her. Whoever she wasn't hiding. She was marking her territory, every line laced with the kind of intimacy you can't fake. Then I found it, a photo of the bra. My bra, now tucked away in my drawer, paraded in a message that made it clear exactly what Jason had been doing in Los Angeles. Beneath it, her words, "I can't wait for you to take this off me again." My hands went cold. I kept scrolling, screen after screen, each one tightening the knot in my chest. I started taking photos, quick, precise, making sure to capture every timestamp, every message, every image. I saved them all in a hidden folder on my own phone, then carefully deleted my tracks from his. The sound of the shower was steady, like a timer counting down the last seconds before everything changed. My mind was already racing, not with panic but with plans. This wasn't going to be a quiet confrontation, not a whispered argument in the kitchen or a teary midnight confession. Jason would expect that. He'd know how to charm his way out, how to twist things back onto me. No, I wanted something undeniable. Something public. I wanted the truth to land in a way that even he couldn't talk his way around. I put his phone back exactly where I'd found it and slid under the covers just as the water shut off. My breathing slowed, my eyes half closed. Jason came out a minute later, running his fingers through his damp hair. "Morning," he said, that old easy warmth back in his voice. I smiled, tucked my phone out of sight, and answered him like nothing in the world was wrong. Inside, though, I felt electric. Alive in a way I hadn't in years. I'd just pulled back the curtain on his entire act, and he had no idea. After that, every conversation felt like a dance. Jason would talk, tell me about his day, his work, the little annoyances of life. I'd play along, asking the right questions, laughing at the right moments. He thought I was still in the dark, that I was the same trusting Ava he'd always known. That was the beauty of it. He'd never see me coming. I started picturing it, the moment it would all come crashing down. The stunned look, the silence, the way the truth would hit him like a stone thrown into a still lake, sending ripples everywhere. The countdown had begun. A week went by, every day more surreal than the last. I moved through the motions: work, dinner, texts to friends, the occasional call with my mom in Houston, while inside, the old me was quietly packing her bags, making room for someone sharper, someone who refused to be fooled twice. It was almost absurd, how normal everything seemed on the outside. Jason started planning a small dinner party for the weekend, something to make up for being gone, he said. He suggested inviting our friends, a couple of his co-workers, maybe even his sister from Dallas. I agreed without hesitation, putting on my sweetest, most supportive voice. He didn't notice a thing. Every night, I rehearsed what would come next. I reread the messages I'd saved, the photos, the evidence. I replayed the memory of his laugh, light and fake, as he'd explained away the red bra. The memory didn't sting anymore. Instead, it fueled me. Power, I realized, sometimes feels like patience. Sometimes it means letting the truth breathe. Waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself. Friday arrived. I worked from home, making small talk over email, trying not to jump every time Jason messaged me from his office. Pick up wine for Saturday? Do you want to cook or should we just order pizza? His tone was casual, even tender, as if nothing could possibly be amiss. By Saturday afternoon, the apartment was spotless, the table set with flowers, the kitchen counter lined with bottles of wine and take-out menus. I'd convinced him not to stress about cooking. Our friends arrived, and laughter bounced around the living room. Jason's sister, Morgan, brought a homemade pie. Even his best friend Drew, who never stayed at parties longer than an hour, looked genuinely happy to be there. Jason held court, telling stories about his business trip. This time, every detail sounded rehearsed, as if he'd practiced in the mirror. Everyone laughed at the right moments. I watched from across the room, smiling, topping up drinks, floating through the party like a perfect hostess. But my mind wasn't on the conversation. My mind was counting down, quietly noting every detail, the way Jason flinched when his phone buzzed, the way he overcompensated with compliments whenever someone mentioned how happy we looked, the way he avoided meeting my eyes whenever there was a pause in the conversation. After dinner, just before dessert, I stood up and cleared my throat. My heart raced, but my voice was steady. Hey, everyone, before we dive into Morgan's amazing pie, I've got a little surprise for Jason. He looked up, caught off guard. Oh? What's this about? I crossed to the sideboard and picked up a gold-wrapped box tied with a silk ribbon. All eyes were on me. I set it in front of him. Just something I found in your suitcase when you got home from LA, I said lightly. Go ahead, open it. For a moment, Jason's face didn't change. He was a master at keeping his cool, after all. But as he untied the ribbon, peeled back the paper, and opened the lid, his mask began to slip. Inside, the red lace bra, folded neatly on a bed of tissue paper. Next to it, the hotel bar receipt. On top, a stack of printed screenshots, messages, timestamps, the photo that had haunted me for a week. The evidence, arranged like a carefully crafted exhibit. The silence in the room was sudden and absolute. Jason's face drained of color. He looked from the box, to me, to the guests, searching desperately for the right script. "This isn't," he started, but his voice broke. For the first time in all our years together, he didn't seem to know what to say. Morgan's chair scraped loudly against the floor as she stood. "I think we've all heard enough," as she said, her voice soft but unmistakably final. Jason slumped forward, the fight draining out of him before it could even begin. No one rushed to defend him. No one said a word. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply sat, my hands resting on the table, meeting each friend's gaze in turn. I wasn't looking for sympathy, and I didn't need to explain. The evidence spoke for itself. Gradually, the conversation stumbled back in awkward fits and starts. People avoided looking at Jason, tried to fill the silence with nervous chatter about traffic, weather, anything but what had just unfolded. But I wasn't pretending. I'd done what I came to do. And now all that was left was to decide how and when I would walk away for good. I didn't wait for the sun to rise before making my decision. As soon as the last guest slipped out the door and the apartment returned to that uncanny stillness, I stood up, walked to our bedroom, and opened the closet. My suitcase had been packed for days, just in case I needed to leave fast. I set it on the bed, my hands steady, almost peaceful. All the uncertainty and suspicion of the last week were gone, replaced by a crisp sense of purpose. Behind me, Jason hovered in the doorway, his voice barely above a whisper. "Aver, wait. Please, just let me explain, let me." But I was already done with explanations. I didn't even look at him. My focus was on the zipper, the neat order of my things inside the suitcase, the passport I tucked in the front pocket. Just in case. I'd been ready for this moment since the night I found that bra. When Jason realized I wasn't bluffing, that I wouldn't be talked down or charmed out of my decision, he dropped the act. His words turned desperate, hollow, frantic apologies, justifications, promises to change. But it was all background noise. For the first time in years, I could barely feel anything for him except relief that it was finally over. I pulled on my coat and grabbed my keys, the familiar weight of freedom settling onto my shoulders. Jason reached out, one last time, his voice cracking. "Please, Aver, just give me one more chance." But I was already in the hallway, closing the door behind me, letting the cool night air clear my head. The city outside was quiet, Austin's 2 a.m. hush, with the occasional rumble of a car or a distant train whistle. I walked to my car, slipped behind the wheel, and drove without looking back. My new apartment was across town, a lease I'd signed days ago. The kitchen was already stocked with groceries, the bed made with clean sheets. When I arrived, I set down my suitcase, slipped off my shoes, and simply stood in the middle of the living room. The absence of Jason wasn't a void. It was a clearing, wide, open, filled with possibilities. I poured myself a glass of water and walked out onto the tiny balcony. From there, I could see the city lights blinking and the outline of the river in the distance. Freedom didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like peace. And peace was something I hadn't realized I'd been missing until that very moment. By noon the next day, the fallout had already started. My phone buzzed with messages from friends, some pretending they hadn't heard, others bluntly asking if the story was true. My best friend, Kendra, sent a string of heart emojis and an invitation to dinner. I let the calls go to voicemail, replied to a few texts, but mostly I kept quiet. The story would move on its own, just like everything else in Jason's life. I imagined him pacing that empty apartment, scrambling for a version of events that might salvage his pride. Maybe he'd blame me, maybe he'd blame the universe, but it didn't matter anymore. I'd spent enough time trying to manage his feelings. Now, all I wanted was to manage my own. That evening, I unpacked slowly, savoring the quiet of my new place. Every drawer I filled, every picture I hung on the wall felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd forgotten I owned. There was no scent of unfamiliar perfume here, no suitcase hiding secrets. Just my things, my space, my rules. When I was done, I sat on the floor in the living room, back against the wall, knees pulled to my chest. I watched the last light fade from the sky, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to look over my shoulder or question the truth in someone's voice. I was alone. But I was free. And freedom, I realized, was the most beautiful thing I could ever wear. The next morning, I opened my drawer and pulled out the red bra one last time. It didn't feel heavy anymore, just a relic from a chapter one was glad to close. I placed it in a bag for donation, along with a few old clothes I no longer wanted, and dropped it off at a charity bin on my way to the coffee shop. Let someone else decide its next story. Mine with it was finally, completely over. Life after Jason didn't explode into wild adventure or instant happiness. Instead, it unfolded in small, quiet moments, a morning coffee on my balcony, shoes kicked off, toes curled against cool concrete while the city stretched awake. For the first time in years, nobody was expecting anything of me except myself. I'd spent so long tending to Jason's moods, keeping our relationship afloat, managing the story we told the world, that silence felt strange. But strange quickly turned into soothing. The day after I left, I woke early, sunlight streaking through the blinds, no alarm clock, no Jason rustling around for an early conference call. I lingered in bed, scrolling social media, catching up on messages I'd ignored the day before. Kendra's texts were still there, bright and insistent. A let's get tacos. Let's celebrate. I'll bring margaritas. You bring the stories. I smiled, not ready to share everything just yet, but grateful for the unconditional support. At noon, I took the bag with the red bra and a few of Jason's old t-shirts, leftovers I'd somehow packed in my haste, and walked to a nearby donation drop box. Standing in front of it, I paused. My life felt lighter, like the act of letting go had made more room for possibility. I dropped the bag in, closed the hatch, and with that small gesture, left the last tangible bit of our life together behind. My new job let me work remotely, so I set up my laptop at the kitchen table and actually enjoyed the day's meetings. I let myself be present. My co-workers had no idea anything in my world had changed. They just saw the same Aver, maybe a little more focused, maybe a little less distracted than usual. Later, I went for a walk around the neighborhood, rediscovering the city on my own terms. I stopped at a coffee shop I'd always wanted to try, ordered an absurdly fancy latte, and sat outside watching people pass by, students in Texas sweatshirts, young parents with strollers, a couple laughing so loudly it made me smile. Austin felt new again. Every street, every mural, every food truck was suddenly available, unweighted by old routines or obligations. I realized I didn't have to check in with anyone, didn't have to text Jason updates or answer for how I spent my day. I could go to a movie at noon. I could eat pancakes for dinner. The freedom was intoxicating in its simplicity. The texts from Jason started rolling in by late afternoon. At first, they were pleading, a please call me. I'm sorry. I messed up. Then defensive. This isn't fair. You didn't even give me a chance to explain. Then, inevitably, blaming. You never really understood how hard my work is. You just gave up. I read them all, but felt nothing. No urge to respond. No anger. Just a strange, quiet pity. He'd been a chapter. Nothing more. Friends called, some out of concern, some out of curiosity, a few openly shocked at the sudden ending. I told Kendra more than I told anyone else. We met up for dinner at our favorite taco place, sitting on the patio as the sun dipped low over South Congress. So, you really did it, Kendra said, squeezing my hand. I really did. I'm proud of you, Ishi said. Also, you look lighter. Like, for real. 10 pounds of emotional baggage, gone. We laughed, and for the first time, the sound felt genuine, not forced, not performative, just real. That night, back at my apartment, I lit a candle and took a long bath, letting the water soak away whatever old sadness lingered. For years, I'd measured myself by how well I held things together, how much I could forgive, how convincingly I could pretend everything was fine. But now, I was finally learning how to let go. Before bed, I opened my phone, scrolled to a picture I'd taken that afternoon of the Colorado River, shimmering, golden, endless, and posted it to my feed. My caption was simple. Sometimes you have to let something go to realize how light you can feel. Here's to new beginnings. The likes and comments rolled in, friends cheering me on, coworkers posting hearts and "you got this" messages. No one needed the details. The important part was that I felt seen, not as part of a couple, not as Jason's girlfriend, but as myself. I fell asleep with the window open, the city humming outside, a breeze cool against my skin. I wasn't waiting for anyone to come home. I wasn't worrying about what might be hiding in a suitcase. I wasn't anyone's secret, or consolation prize, or backup plan. I was just Ava. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. The days passed, one after another, each a little easier than the last. There was no dramatic movie montage, no sudden burst of happiness, no instant transformation. Instead, there was a slow, steady rebuilding. I let myself feel everything: relief, sadness, a weird kind of nostalgia for the best days with Jason. But I didn't try to rush past any of it. I'd promised myself I wouldn't carry old baggage into whatever came next. I started spending more time with my friends, not out of desperation, but out of genuine connection. Kendra and I explored parts of Austin we'd always talked about but never visited. Bookstores tucked in leafy neighborhoods, a weirdly famous Donna truck, free concerts in tiny bars. Sometimes we'd end up sitting on my balcony for hours, just talking and listening to the city settle down for the night. She told me stories about her own heartbreaks, the times she'd doubted herself, the moments she'd found her own kind of courage. "You know what I love," she said one night, pulling her knees up to her chest. "You never made Jason the villain. Even when he hurt you, you didn't hate him. You just let him go." I thought about that. Maybe it was true. Maybe the real power wasn't in exposing him or humiliating him, though I couldn't lie, that moment at the dinner party had been satisfying. Maybe the power was in moving forward, not letting one betrayal rewrite the story of my life. At work, I started volunteering for new projects, things I'd always wanted to try but never had the energy for before. My manager noticed the shift. "You've been killing it lately, Ava. What's your secret?" I laughed. I think I just have a lot more headspace these days. He grinned, but he didn't press for details. I liked that. I started running again, just a mile or two every morning, headphones in, the world slowly coming alive around me. Sometimes I'd cross the river just as the sun was rising, the city glowing gold and pink and endless. Each morning, I set one small intention for the day: smile at a stranger, try a new lunch spot, call my sister in Chicago. Every little promise I kept to myself felt like another brick in a new foundation. And then, of course, there were the moments when the past crept back in. An old photo that popped up in my phone, a song that reminded me of a road trip, the smell of Jason's cologne wafting from someone else in a coffee shop. At first, those moments hurt. But gradually, they became easier to handle. They were just reminders that I'd lived, that I'd loved, and that I'd survived. About a month after I left, I got an email from Jason. The subject line was just my name. For a minute, I debated opening it. But in the end, I did. It was long, full of apologies and regret, but also a strange kind of gratitude. He admitted he'd lied. He said he'd never meant to hurt me, that he respected the way I'd handled everything, that he hoped I'd find happiness. He even thanked me for not burning everything down on your way out. I read it twice, then deleted it. I didn't need a response. The chapter was over. His words didn't sting, but they didn't matter anymore, either. That weekend, I hosted a small get-together in my new apartment. Nothing fancy, just a few friends, a pile of takeout containers, laughter echoing off the bare walls. Someone brought wine, someone else brought homemade cookies. We told stories, played music, danced like idiots. At one point, I looked around and realized I hadn't thought about Jason all night. I snapped a picture of us, arms around each other, smiling, and posted it with a caption: "This is what moving on looks like." The response was instant and overwhelming. Friends from all over chiming in with encouragement, inside jokes, love. My aunt commented, "You look so happy, Ava. I hope you know how proud we are of you." And for once, I believed her. Late that night, after everyone left, I cleaned up and sat on the balcony again. The city lights blinked in the warm Texas air. I found myself grinning for no reason at all. I wasn't healed, not all the way. There were scars, sure. But there was also joy, stubborn and insistent, refusing to be shut out. I realized I didn't need to have it all figured out to feel content. Sometimes, surviving was enough. Sometimes, just sitting with yourself and feeling okay was more than enough. I raised a glass of wine to the skyline, the breeze playing with my hair, and whispered to no one in particular, here's to what comes next.